Hello and welcome to another episode of Building Experiences with Mark. I'm Mark Schultz and I'm the Product Marketing Manager for Adobe Experience Manager across the APAC region. If it's the first time you've watched this show, this is year 2. We're in the second season, I guess, where we bring excellent product leaders, thought leaders, experts who are using the technology to build these great experiences and put them together. And today is no exception. We have a great guest joining us. Now, if you are new to the show, we are almost at the 200 subscriber mark, which is a milestone that I'm really proud of, and getting good feedback. So feel free to hit that subscribe button, so make sure that you get the notifications of future shows that we have coming up. And we've got some really cool stuff coming up as our engineering teams are building really cool innovations that we want to share. So, look, this show is all about guests, so let's bring our first guest straight in and let's have a conversation. Mathias, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark. And absolutely love your jingles. They just put a smile on your face no matter what.
Gets everyone in the mood and ready for some fun. Now, look, by way of introduction, I mean, you have been working on a really sought after enhancement to Adobe Experience Manager. Maybe, do you want to take a moment and introduce yourself and what you do at Adobe?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. And hey, good seeing you again, Mark, on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
So, yes, I'm on the product management team for AEM Sites, which is the web content management part of AEM, AEM being Adobe Experience Manager, content management system. AEM is split into AEM Sites for web content management, AEM Assets for digital asset management, AEM Forms for regulatory workflows with forms, and then a large foundation, which has been undergoing a lot of innovation in the past couple of years. So again, I'm on the sites team, product manager there, and just loving it.
Fantastic. And I know we have a lot of customers already using some of the functionality that you look after. I know content fragments is a big area that has seen lots of enhancements and adoption over the last few years. And there's quite often customers say, hey, we're trying to meet these use cases. So I know that's your passion. But what are we going to talk about today? You've just released some new functionality, I believe.
Yeah, just 2 weeks ago in our monthly release, and believe it or not, we're doing monthly feature releases now with AEM as a cloud service, fully cloud native in the cloud, daily bug fixes, if we have to. Not that there are never any bugs, but if we can release every single day, and new features come out every month. So we released a GraphQL API for content fragment delivery, along with a whole bunch of content fragment enhancements just 2 weeks ago to the public. It's been tested internally quite heavily for some very significant Adobe internal test and use cases that will also go live later this year. And we wanted to push it out as quickly as possible, which we now can with Cloud Service, so that our customers can, enjoy this yet another way of getting content out of AEM, of which we have so many, which we think is pretty cool.
And before we get into it, this is available today for cloud service customers, and I believe for managed service customers and 6.5 customers, we have a roadmap for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we just released on cloud service first. I mean, and it's not cloud service only or anything, it's cloud service first, for the simple reason that we can innovate so quickly on cloud service. So we release on cloud service, and then we add another couple of features that we always wanted to, but couldn't get out quite at GA. And we can do that very quickly and easily. And then once we have this critical mass of core capabilities, then we will port it to a 6.5 AMS, managed services, Adobe Managed Services, which now enjoys a quarterly releases. Also a lot faster than in the past, where usually AEM got annual releases. So now we got quarterly releases, but still slower than a cloud service. So we're currently envisioning kind of sometime throughout this year, most likely in the second half, for that port of the new content fragment capabilities and GraphQL API to make its way to 6.5 and managed services.
Great. So can we get you to share maybe some of the enhancements you've done for content fragments? For just general content fragment use, and then maybe talk about the GraphQL layer to expose this. Does that sound good?
Yeah, absolutely. If you ask me so nicely. So yes,
let's get into it. All right, so headless technology is of interest to many customers, and Mathias has actually put a lot of work into understanding the new workflow requirements. So let's hand over and actually take a look at some of this technology, and maybe you can talk through not just the features but also the the thought process behind some of the innovations you put together.
Yeah, absolutely glad to, especially after that yet even better jingle. They're just fantastic.
I got more of
Uh,
them.
yeah, let me start with the thought process first, maybe, and then we'll dive in the product. So all of these content fragment enhancements and GraphQL API are, of course, in context of headless. Headless content management is kind of the hottest thing and the newest kid on the block for rendering experiences across channels for the past couple of years. I mean, it's not crazy net new, like just showing up yesterday. It's been around for a few years, but it is still is the newest way of rendering experiences to a glass. And with AEM, we always aspired that we can let our customers pick and choose which implementation model suits their channels and suits also their organizational requirements best. And here on this slide, you kind of see all three models that conceivably exist, with head-on the right, which is the traditional model or full stack. Sometimes we say head full as opposed to headless, but that doesn't really make sense. So here we say head on. So that's the traditional model of rendering through components in AEM, HTML, server generated HTML out to a browser. And in the middle, what we have is hybrid, which is where the glass starts transitioning from a browser that consumes HTML to a JavaScript application, a single page application, which goes into the headless domain already. But we and our customers still desire a tight connection with the backend. So you got sort of a half coupled or a half decoupled architecture with a single page app editor, as we say in AEM, that allows importing a single page application into AEM. And then actually what you see is what you get editing that single page application in AEM. And in fact, if I can just announce that as well, in the same release 2 weeks ago, we also released single page app editor 2.0, which now allows you to keep the single page application outside of AEM, hosted and running wherever it is today, on its own instance, on its own server, in the same domain, different domain. We take care of cross-domain traffic and tell AEM only where that single page application is with a URL and a manifest file. That's all that AEM needs to know. And with that, AEM's page editor can then edit and manipulate, and especially also preview and view that single page application in real time.
Yeah.
So full WYSIWYG editing for that single page application.
That's exciting. And we've had a show. We had Danny Gordon and Zora Nikolovsky go through some of the single page application process. But this new edition is really exciting, and I dare say we'll probably have you back on the show to talk through, focus just on single page apps. But I think what's interesting, if you look at that diagram, to some people you'd think, well, hasn't AEM always done this, right? We've always had an XML API. You've been able to use Sling models and things like that to expose content. So what is different about the release now as far as thinking from a headless perspective?
Oh, what's different now is, and you're right, I digressed a little because we're quite excited about single page app editor 2.0. But what is new now is that on the left, the headless model, which is on the slide here, it's in red. That is now an implementation model that can stand in its own right. And if a customer, you choose that this is the only way how you want to implement AEM, you actually can. In the past, for quite a while, we actually could support these headless use cases just fine by using this diagonal arrow, for example, by having JSON exported from AEM components, and you build your own API endpoints by putting a component in the page and so forth. But this was still like half WCM. Now with enhancements, you can really implement AEM the way how most other headless content management systems are being implemented. Repository in the back end, structured content, and a pure content API that delivers this content to a decoupled, here now completely decoupled JavaScript front-end application. So that is net new.
So is it fair to say then that there's a lot more control at the front end rather than relying on a back end, AEM expert to actually manipulate and munch together the content into the right format using, components, and have that reliance on a page model, being able to now just say, hey, I want this content via API.
Exactly. Yeah, there's more control on the front end now, but also more responsibility on the front end. And we're seeing that with a number of customers and projects. Sometimes, this looks very cool in the beginning, but then after a while, it's actually not quite such a shiny toy anymore, because there is a lot of responsibility in this front end. And when it comes to line of business users, for example,
Yep.
wanting to edit content, then it becomes a different story. And so being able to mix and match with AM, we're pretty happy to be able to offer. And the architecture of AM also helped us build these capabilities in such a modular fashion, which I always think is interesting to listen to the architects working on AM that go all the way back to Day Software, when they point out that AM actually was architected from the beginning for a decoupled architecture, with that in mind.
Yeah.
And at the time, when content management systems back then usually had a proprietary database as a repository and a proprietary application layer, to deliver HTML to a browser, that's where AM had a standards-based open source repository, a Java content repository, and also has an open source standards-based application layer, which is a Sling web application framework. And the new GraphQL API actually builds on top of Sling, actually utilizes Sling. So it's very modular, and it utilizes this architecture, which from the beginning really has been built for the headless world today, before headless was a thing, really, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, there are people watching live. This is a live recording, so if you do have questions, feel free to type them in, and we'll see if we can get them answered as we go through today's content. So look, I
Yeah,
think this is great. Maybe if you want to talk through some detail about what has actually changed, I believe you've got a couple of demos for us as well.
yeah, you're trying to get me off that slide, aren't you?
No, no, I love that slide.
Yeah, yeah, no, I was warned before that slides are not allowed. So no, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. So in AM, just to show everyone, again, the first step for headless content management is content models, which we're storing here in assets under tools and settings, which is sort of the same usability layer where page templates are stored. We're also storing content fragment models, and they're here. And you see there's in this demo instance here, which is, by the way, running in the cloud. So see, this is a cloud instance here, all cloud native. If I can just kind of digress again and show that and brag with that, in Cloud Manager here. So we're currently on this dev instance here. There's a stage instance, there's a prod instance, and everything is very cloud native now with AM. So here we are in content fragment models, and that UI, this UI here, the ones who are using AM, you're probably familiar with that. We can find our config. So I just have to find my config. Where's my config? Oh, actually, I'm in a different config already. Mathias Siegel test. So here's my config. Here are some models in my config. And if I look at this model, so here are a couple of enhancements that you see. So this is the Fragment Model Editor, where you define your content structure, your schema, essentially, for what content authors then later will create as fragments. And there's multiple data types that are available, and you can drag and drop these into the canvas here. And we have enhanced the number of data types that are available. So there are things available now, such as, for example, a native JSON object here that I have in this model, I believe, where you can add a JSON object and allow then later the Fragment Editor to enter just pure native JSON. Very importantly is, though, and this is probably the largest enhancement that we added to this whole mechanism, is that we're now allowing to create fragment references. So there's a fragment reference data type, and I have one or two in here in this model where this model is allowed and is set up to reference other models, so submodels, if you will. So you can break a complex content structure now down into parent models and submodels. If you think of a contract, for example, a contract as a parent model could have a signature field and a body field and a header and a footer as submodels. And those submodels are then in the Fragment Editor exposed as fragment references. So you can create referenced content fragments. And that is a pretty complex architecture. And we spent a lot of time getting this right. And it's been really highly appreciated by many customers, because they were always asking us before, how can we customize content models, how we can customize data types. And now with being able to create more atomic structures of models themselves, you can pretty much customize as much as you want from an overall content structuring point of view.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people cheering about that feature alone. Definitely I've had that from various people saying, when can we nest fragments within fragments and have a relationship between them? So that alone, I
That's
think we'd end the show there. That's great. Like that's a good enhancement. You've got more though.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of like validation rules, for example, that we added on content references. So here, for example, we're referencing content. So there's typical validation rules that you find across systems, like to allow later on the author only add or reference a certain file sizes, certain file types, image widths, image heights. Fields can be made required. They can also be made unique. If you're rendering as a list, then you can set the maximum number of items that list can later contain in the Fragment Editor. So a lot of these detail enhancements to refine content modeling capabilities is what we added, in addition to this large enhancement of nesting models and nesting fragments. And in addition to that, maybe if I go back out of this model here, we also added some search capabilities where you can now search models and, for example, filter by model type, and also you can also filter models by tags. So you can actually tag models, tag content fragment models. You can filter from a viewing point of view these models by tags. But then most importantly later on, and I'll just kind of switch forward to fragments, and we can go back to models if you want. But then in fragments, in content fragments, I'm in assets now, AEM assets, files. And if I go to my folder, here, and I look at, well, let's look at this folder here, English. If you look at my folder properties, so what is new is that on folders for content fragments, you can define policies. That is new. And these policies, you can allow fragment creation by limiting fragments that are allowed in this folder by these tags. So you can tag models in model creation, and then you can allow these models for creation in that folder by tags. And that way you can implement very nice governance rules. That only certain users can use only certain models in a folder for creating content fragment. Yeah. You can mix and match this from a permissions and roles and responsibilities point of view very nicely.
Yeah, I really like that. And it looks like you effectively just manage all these models and the fragments themselves just as content, but you've still got the benefit of having hierarchy, folder structures, etc., and search capabilities, which is nice. So you're not enforcing a way of managing the content. You're allowing that back up to the brand and organization, but still giving the user some control. So that's great.
Yeah, exactly. And then here in Fragment admin now, you can see nicely. These are all smaller enhancements, but we can see. Let's go into team. Which models a fragment is based upon. You can see the publishing status. If we go here now into the search capability. We can search fragments by model. Where is it? Where is it? Content fragment model down here. So you can search content fragments by model. And we're starting building this out more, and there will be more. If anyone you want to know later sort of what we're working on for the future, there's a lot of this usability stuff and enhancements that we want to work on more to especially make this whole search-based findability of content a lot easier, a lot faster, take out clicks from the UI, maybe put the search bar on top, and allow tasks like this here, for example, finding content fragments by model, very quick and easy right at your fingertips. But at least in the currently existing pattern in the UI, we already added it in order to help managing large amounts of fragments a lot easier than it was before.
Yeah, fantastic.
So if we then look at one of these models, it's just fragments, excuse me, here. Oops.
Live demos.
Yep, live demos, that can happen. If we look at this content fragment here in the Fragment Editor, first of all, you see a couple of enhancements up here. So we have a publish button now directly in the Fragment Editor. And we also have you'll see actually here we have a preview of the JSON that will be output from this model. So these are all kind of enhancements in the Fragment Editor. And in the Fragment Editor, going back to the nesting capabilities, you see here, for example, so friends, this is in the model set up such that this is a content fragment reference. So we can now here add a content fragment reference. We can find another content fragment and say Brett is a friend of Amy's. And now we have this subfragment here referenced in this parent fragment. And in fact, you can now also even right from here in the Fragment Editor also initiate editing this reference fragment, which will open another browser tab. And we're working on some UI prototypes internally to keep this all within the same browser tab to make this all part of a session in the Fragment Editor. But at least currently, you can now edit this referenced fragment. And once you're done editing this reference fragment, you go back to the parent fragment. And you can also, if we say add one more time, so you can actually create a new content fragment that will be referenced right from here. So if we click this, you see inline opening of the Fragment Editor. Oops, little delay here. And then we can, let's say Jack doesn't exist yet as a content fragment. So we'll create this fragment. You can say open, it would open another browser tab with the Fragment Editor, or we can say done. And now you see Jack, the content fragment called Jack has now been added as a reference content fragment. So really a lot of enhancements in this area of allowing nesting of models and nesting of fragments.
Yeah, and if you're new to content fragments, then you still have all the capability of variations. I'm assuming you can still do annotations and all these different things to manage them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a good point, Mark. I get so excited about the new stuff. I forget about talking about the stuff we've had for a while. So yes, I mean you can create variations. So you can always create a variation of a fragment, and that is then so you have a master, and you have a variation, and in the variation you can edit the content. Say you can remove this image here, for example, in the variation. So it exists in the master, but it does not exist in the variation. And these are all stored as in one fragment as a single resource. And in fact, the variation inherits from the master. So you can make then content changes in the master and synchronize these changes to the variation. So that is all still there, of course. Also, annotation capabilities, you can, in the text editor, for example, in full screen view, you can see that very nicely, where you can add a comment. So it works in, let's say, in Seattle. Which one is it? Here, this one here. So you can add a comment, say this is the town. And if we go back, then this comment, see, was added here, and you can add more comments and you start building a timeline view. Just like an admin, have a timeline view, you start building this timeline view with who added a comment, what is the comment, and in the editor, it displays the location of the comment. So that, of course, is all still available. Also, even going back to the earliest versions of content fragments, which, believe it or not, is AIM 6.2,
Wow,
which
it's
is
going
now,
back.
how long did they go? 5 years, maybe,
Yeah,
at least?
it's taking me back.
Yeah, exactly. So associated content, so being able to associate a collection of images to a content fragment to allow copy editors further downstream pick images just from a collection rather than just a giant DAM repository.
Yeah.
That is still there as well.
Yeah,
So
so I think
also,
that's one of the important things when we think about headless use cases. We don't just throw out all of the governance and workflow of true content authoring. And what you've got here now is a nice balance between the two, right? You've got your typical content management workflow, plus you've got the structured content modeling, and you put them two together. Of course, everything you've shown us to now is not unique to headless. Like, we're talking headless use case, but of course you can use it on a full website, and that's one of the beauties of this functionality, right? It's that content is now available for both web and for headless, and so if I'm
exactly.
authoring
Yeah.
content, I don't have to think about two different environments. I've got everything in the one place.
Yeah, exactly. You can mix and match to whatever extent you want.
Yeah,
And then from an output point of view, just like you said, Mark, right now you can put these content fragments into pages, which goes through components. And as you all know, AEM has this newer generation of components called core components, which are really APIs in their own right.
yeah,
They can export HTML, of course, to browser, but they can also export JSON in their own right. In fact, they can export AMP. It's an enhancement we added last year just with the URL selector. You can have them export AMP. And now, in addition to all of that, which also exists, you can now also deliver this content through a direct content API. And that's our new GraphQL API. And I have an example here. So we have an out-of-the-box endpoint here. And in this, and with AEM GraphQL, which is an open source editor, of course, it comes out of the box, so you don't have to install it from GitHub separately, like with some other systems. So it comes out of the box, and the system automatically queries, which schemas exist. So schema here in the sense of GraphQL schema. So every time you create a model, just like I had here for these persons in that team, like Amy, the fragment, based on a person model, is available here, and you can see the system finds the schema that belongs to the person model. And you can always query with GraphQL, either to get all fragments or to get individual path. See, so let me just try to write one. Items, and then you can look for the individual, like path and name, and the fields that we defined in the fragments, they are now here available. And you see this is nicely, there's some nice supporting tools available. So if we now run this query, now we get all instances of content fragments based on this person model listed here. And I mean, that's a whole bunch of them because it also goes across languages. We can add, actually, let me try to do that here so what's the syntax for this? EN, to get only the EN models. Is that the right one? Language master, yeah. So in the path, it's EN, 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 EN. So now we get only the English um, fragments based on the person model, or we can query for the German versions. Now we have language masters D, E, D, E, D, E, D. Yep, now we got the German fragments. So now when it comes to GraphQL querying, no, the sky's the limit. So the flexibility from a querying point of view, for all of you who are GraphQL experts, you will already start kind of getting your fingers on the keyboard and wanting to try this out. The full GraphQL standards available here. So you can do
And I
list
think we
query.
should stop there and
Yeah.
acknowledge, like, this is a big departure, I guess, from what people normally think with Experience Manager, right? They normally think, okay, I got to get an environment provision that's going to take weeks, and then I need to start up a project. They're going to have to build a framework. They're going to have to deploy some skeleton code, and then I can start authoring. And it's 2 months have gone by. In cloud, we're up and running in less than an hour, and then without any understanding of AEM, as a front end developer, you can just go and query the content directly, and then from an authoring perspective, is create a model, start writing content. So you could be spitting out content within an hour after getting your environment up and running. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, no, that's true, Mark, because
Yeah.
what we've seen so far, that's really all there is. Content models, then you create content fragments based on these models, and then you create queries. In fact, AEM has a REST, HTTP REST API as well. You can do
Yep.
that too with REST queries. GraphQL is better, it's newer, it's cooler, more powerful, more capable. You create your queries to get the content out in JSON format, and that's it. That's it. That's the
Yep.
decoupled model. And of course, there's more complexity than at the front end. The front end application that needs its what previously was pages and now needs to do pages in React. And React has components. So a
Yep.
lot of what was WCM before is now in React.
Yep.
But a lot of people like that, and it's cool and it's flexible.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I guess
So
you've got choice now, right? If you want to build a static page, you can just do that. If you've got content that is structured, you can build it in a structured way and consume it in a static site using the core components, like the content fragment core components. But then you've immediately got that API. So your developers who are building a React app, a chatbot, an Alexa app, and things like that, can just consume that content immediately. So really cool
yeah.
stuff. Is there anything else you want to share while we've got the screen share up?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I prepared a couple of tabs here. I can just click through them quickly so you don't see me kind of fumbling writing queries and forgetting all the brackets and semicolons. So we saw list query. Then you can, of course, query by individual. We can query for individual fragments. So you give it a path,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get fragments by that path. We did the locale return, so you get only fragments for certain locale. You can this is an example for filter. Yeah, so there's a filter syntax where you can filter the response to get only fragments that contain Jane, for example, which is the name. So only the fragment with the first name Jane, last name Lee is returned. You can use variables. GraphQL unions, in fact, is supported as well. So there's really no shortage of GraphQL tricks that are available here. Probably as a last thing to show real quick, what is really cool, where we have a first version in this UI here, is that we're also working on, well, actually, we have it. It's in the release already, a possibility to persist queries. So this query here, let's assume this was your query, you tested it and you validated it, and you go to your config, you can actually save this query and it will get persisted in AEM. And what it then allows you to do from your JavaScript client is to request that persisted query with a GET request with a Go URL or a copy URL. And that allows the CDN to cache that query. And that makes execution of that query significantly faster. Also works without that UI. You can do it with curl commands, or you can do it with Postman. But we started putting a UI directly on GraphQL to really advertise and promote the usage of these persistent queries to take advantage of the CDN, which, again, kind of advertising AIM as a cloud service a little bit. CDN is included. So AEM Cloud Service is tightly integrated with Fastly and comes with Fastly. So using these persistent queries here, you can take advantage of that CDN that the system comes with.
Yeah, so I imagine then you've got the flexibility to write your queries and test them and build out the functionality. And then when you're ready to ramp into production mode, then you can flip that over into a persisted query. And then you get that, speed because it's not going back to AEM to go and execute the query. It's a pre-cache result. It's effectively static content, yeah?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so this was a quick run through. Maybe let me just point out one thing real quick, if that's okay, Mark.
Yeah.
I prepared a tab here for everyone. Just take a look at these materials. Getting started with AIM Headless, GraphQL. It's not just GraphQL actually. It's all of the content fragment, content modeling enhancements. It's a very nice video. It's a 15-minute video that explains the theory behind it a little bit, and then shows you pretty much the demo that we just looked at here. And then also with some sample codes. So the AEM sample website, which is a weekend, WKND here, that those of you who've been with AEM for a while probably remember and know as a Maven archetype for a regular website. That is already available as a React application. And in these tutorials here, they take you through how to connect a headless AEM with a React version of Weekend. So worthwhile checking out.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, I think that's some really exciting innovation, and I believe you're not finished, right? There's still more work that you're continuing on. Is there anything you can share without overcommitting yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're really excited about this, and we will definitely work more on GraphQL. Currently, GraphQL, it is, I don't even want to say limited, but it's focused on the delivery of content fragments, and the schemas are automatically generated based on fragment models. We want to make this more flexible in the future. We have thoughts and ideas. We already got a number of requests for, oh, couldn't I use GraphQL to deliver just assets? Or
Yeah.
how about delivering pages with GraphQL? And those are all things that we're thinking about. And those are things that are made possible, again, by this very modular implementation of GraphQL and AEM based on the Sling API. So that's one area. The other area is UIs. We are hard at work with some prototypes to kind of shift them and move the UI around a little bit more to begin transitioning from a server-side UI to front-end client-side UIs. There's a lot going on in that area. And if you follow AEM throughout the year, I'm pretty sure you'll see some pretty cool enhancements in that area as well.
Exciting. It's I think everyone's gonna be curious after that statement, so we'll be waiting for more details. Exciting stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Happy to share.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. Well, unfortunately, we are running out of time. So, look, Matthias, I want to thank you very much for joining us on the show today. I think everyone will agree, not just new functionality, but a lot of thought put into the practical implications and implementation requirements there. So, this is live. This is out there for cloud service customers. More innovation coming, as you heard, and exciting to hear, how people are adopting this in projects, and look forward to seeing more of that. So, Matthias, I'm going to go back to earlier in the conversation about the SPA editor. I'd love to have you back on the show and talk more about some of the enhancements. So, can I get you to commit live in front of the YouTube audience to joining us again in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity, Mark. It was good fun.
Fantastic. All right. Well, if you're watching and you got this far and you're still watching, hit the subscribe button. I'm sure you'll want to watch more. Hit that. Hit the like button as well. You're not a YouTube presenter unless you tell people to smash that like button. So do that for us. Matthias, thanks so much again. Thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Yep. Next time. Bye.